Absolute Flash and Absolute Martian Manhunter are fast approaching, and it looks like with its initial orders, it's living up to the hype of the Absolute universe. Hey Internet, I'm Chris, and this is the place on the internet where I talk about comics, movies, games, and things I'm generally passionate about. So it is March, and we're having 3 new Absolute titles launch in the coming weeks. We have Absolute Flash, Absolute Martian Manhunter, and Absolute Green Lantern. As time has gone by, I was initially most excited about probably like Absolute Green Lantern because you had Al Ewing, and I love the Green Lantern Corps, and I was just excited about that in general. And then the more I found out about Absolute Flash and Absolute Martian Manhunter, the more I got excited about those titles. And of the second wave of Absolute books, those are now my top 2. Like, depending what day you ask me, I'm going to say Absolute Martian Manhunter or I'm going to say Absolute Flash. And it looks like the rest of the world is also very excited about these titles. So Scott Snyder was recently on a podcast and shared initial sales numbers for Absolute Martian Manhunter and Absolute Flash. And they're both clocking in at over 100,000 copies. Now, if you compare that to the boom days of the 90s, that is small, but if you're looking at the year of our Lord 2025, over 100,000 copies for a Martian Manhunter book is insane, especially when you consider like Dennis Camp. Yes, he's writing Ultimates, which is a high selling book right now, but it's not like he's, Scott Snyder or Jason Aaron, who's had sort of like a long career to kind of back that up in the comics industry. Jeff Lemire, I think, has had a really successful career. Animal Man has done a lot of great indie work. Obviously, their work has been adapted into TV with Sweet Tooth, but it is crazy how well these Absolute books are doing, and it just speaks to the ethos that Scott Snyder and the DC team has set out to kind of really deliver on creating a new universe that's really different and doesn't really fall into the traps that the New 52 did and was kind of like half reboot, but some things weren't rebooted. This is a completely new universe with different takes that people are excited about, like different takes on superhero comics, and that's what people want. I think people want comics to be comics and not a reflection of the movies, or they don't want them to be stale because they're trying to be movie safe or be like, hey, how are we going to adapt this into a film? And I think there are some advantages of having movie synergy. Like, obviously you want people to come in from a movie and be like, oh, like that's Thanos, like that's the story I want to read. But also comics has to stand on its own as a medium and also has to have its own excitement. So there is value, again, to that movie synergy. But I think like comics should swing for the fences, and these Absolute books have all done that. Like, have you seen like Absolute Flash? Like, it's completely changed everything. You have a small gorilla Grodd who's like a small ape, which, like, when I first saw that like cover of Wally and Grodd, I thought like, oh, like, is this like a Donnie Darko situation where like that's his imagination? And then I found out that was like the Absolute version of Gorilla Grodd. I'm like, what? I'm just so intrigued by that book. I'm excited to see what Barry's gonna look like, what sort of this new take on the Speed Force is. It won't be called the Speed Force, at least initially. So there's just so much about that book I'm excited about, and there's gonna be a lot of the connective tissue that brings this Absolute universe together. They're not gonna tie in the way the Ultimate Universe does, but I'm excited to see what the crossover will look like. And with Absolute Martian Manhunter is just a bonkers take on a classic character. And Martian Manhunter, like, he hasn't had a solo book in such a long time. His most successful solo run was back in the late 90s with John Ostrander, Tom Mandrake, which was a fantastic run. Every time he's had a series since, I don't think it's really gone anywhere too much. I did like the Steve Orlando run with Riley Rossmo. That was fantastic, but it was only like 11, 12 issues, and it was really a maxi series. And with the sales of Absolute Martian Manhunter, Dennis Camp and Javi Rodriguez can probably map out a lot more. Initially, I think Martian Manhunter, if I'm not mistaken, the only Absolute title that wasn't sort of like set out to be ongoing. Like, they kind of said like, let's do 6 issues, which makes sense. They're trying to play it safe. But with these initial orders being over 100,000, like, I think they'll be able to map out. I don't know if they'll be able to make it an ongoing where like it's gonna go from issue 6 to issue 7 the next month, but at least they could maybe plot out a second plot, or maybe they do this one in chapters. So I'm excited to get more of Dennis Camp. Ultimates is one of my favorite ongoing series. It's like one of two Marvel books I'm reading. So Dennis Camp is doing great work, and it's cool to see them over at DC and to get a book like Absolute Martian Manhunter where they can go wild and really give a different take. Just like there's not much we know about it outside of John being an FBI counterterrorism agent and him being involved in an explosion and that sort of being the inciting incident that kicks off that story. And we don't have a Martian. Like the alien is more of like an alien entity, and there's two minds. So I wonder what the mystery is going to be there. Like I'm already excited about that. So there's just so much about these two books. And then I'm sure when FOC comes for Absolute Green Lantern, the sales will also reflect over 100,000 because it's Al Ewing, it's Green Lantern. You have a Green Lantern series coming out next year. Green Lantern, the main book, is really good right now, so some of that hype will probably rub off on that book. But yeah, overall, this is a huge win for comics, retailers, and DC overall. And I am hyped for Absolute Martian Manhunter and Absolute Flash. What about you guys? Are you excited for Absolute Flash and Absolute Martian Manhunter? Let me know. Like, comment, subscribe. Peace.